Hello, guys. We're back again, Southern Belle Atheism, and you can find us on Twitter under Southern Belle Atheism, Bells of Atheism. And I'm here today with Matthew Skail, who is a old friend of mine from undergraduate back in the day. And now he is an author, a producer of disc games. He's a gamer, and he writes material for live action role playing. So take it away, Matthew. Tell us all about yourself.
Okay, little correction, tabletop role playing. Tabletop role playing,
okay.
yeah, is what I write for. First off, thank you for having me on your show, Amber. It's been a long time. It's good to see you. I started writing last year. I started writing supplements for OSR games, which is an acronym that stands for old school role playing. And what that means for people who aren't familiar, a few years ago there was a resurgence in the game community of people who were using an open game license that was created by Wizards of the Coast, who own Dungeons and Dragons, and using it to retroactively rewrite the original systems from like the 70s and the 80s and produce material for them. And it's a fairly, I mean, it's a niche within a niche, of course, because gaming is quite a niche activity. But it produces games that have the sort of old school feelings, the kind of stuff that I played when I was a kid, when I was young. But the thing that I really like about it, that really appeals to me, besides the fact that it's quite simple and easy to run these kind of games, is that they're very open to tinkering. And so that's allowed me and a lot of other people to produce either their own spins on the old rules or to make supplements and things for them, so to add new content and new material that that they wished that they had seen or that never existed or whatever. And so that's basically what I do. I'm right now I'm primarily writing material for other OSR games. The main two that I write for are Adventure Conqueror King, and which I did a module, their first module, which is called Sinister Stone of Saqqara, and I'm also writing for a game called White Star, which is essentially Dungeons and Dragons by way of Star Wars. So it's basically Dungeons and Dragons in space with laser guns and robots and star swords, not lightsabers, of course. But anyway, so those are the games that I've been writing for mostly in the last year. And in fact, in March, I'll have been doing this for a year, actually. So it's I've got 3 copper sellers on RPGNOW, which means that I've sold over 100 copies of these products each. So that's pretty exciting for me because I'm just a guy who just puts his stuff out there on the web and people buy it. So I don't have a big name or industry recognition or anything like that, and I don't have a company behind me. So that's, I mean, it's not huge. I know some people who've sold way more and whatnot, but for me, it's cool and makes me happy, and I enjoy doing it.
Isn't that sort of the way it's going, though? People are sort of branching out and doing their own thing, especially in the day of the internet, where you can have your own sites and people can buy directly from you. I kind of see, and I'm not a gamer, as like I don't have the experience in it you have, but especially with the fantasy stuff, I see a lot of authors and writers and creative people doing this. And is that sort of where it's at now?
Oh, well, certainly in the OSR. In fact, that's a huge element of the OSR community, is the do-it-yourself phenomenon. Some people have even made like DIY logos to put on their products. And I mean, there's a huge swath of people who do this, and they release stuff on their blogs for free, or even just like in PDFs that they give away for free. Or there's people like me who sell stuff. But yeah, it's definitely it's a very strong be your own boss, do your own kind of your own vision, unrestricted by anybody else. There's even people who, which I'm not one of these, but I think it's kind of neat that they're doing this. Years ago, in the pre-internet age, there were fanzines. And there are some people who are even remaking fanzines, actual physical little, a colored piece of paper from a Xerox cover with then some other Xerox pages stapled and then mailing them out to people. I mean, that's so yeah, it's very much a do-it-yourself community. So yeah,
that's pretty cool. For those who may not know a lot about, I think probably everyone knows what Dungeons and Dragons, what it was. How do you want to describe it for those who are like, they kind of know, but not really? Maybe they've seen Shannara, the series that's on. Maybe they've seen Lord of the Rings. Maybe they've read a couple Dragonlance novels. I read a lot of books. Okay, we've had this conversation about how I have this fetish, this ear fetish for things with pointed ears, and so I read like the whole Dragonlance series about the elves back in the day, and
right.
And I'm a big Trekkie just because of Spock and Vulcans, because they're sexy, and Romulans too. So how would you sort of explain like the whole D&D and Dragonlance and the whole history? And really, it spawned a lot of authors like Terry Brooks.
Oh yeah. I mean, even Terry Pratchett. He originally played D&D, and that's where Ankh-Morpork. Did I say that right? Anyway, his big city from Discworld, that's where it started, or at least that's what I have read. And I, so I mean, a lot of people, a lot of writers and authors and creators and people in Hollywood and stuff, they did grow up with D&D. I mean, Vin Diesel's a D&D player.
I didn't know that, really.
Oh yeah. In fact, there's even there was even a recent like the movie Witch Hunter that came out, I think last year. Like that was based on a character he played in D&D when he was a teenager.
Cool.
So Stephen Colbert, huge D&D player. So I mean, it's just a lot of people that are in the public eye now. They grew up with it. Now I wish I could be as famous as them, but whatever. But as far as like what Dungeons and Dragons is, it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but at its core, it is a game in which you create characters and take part in a shared narrative between yourself and other players. Typically, in almost all role-playing games, barring a very small number, there is a game master or a referee who typically either creates their own adventure or runs one that's been written by someone else. Excuse me. And then this would be like the plot of a movie, for example. And then, so they create the plot and the dangers that are involved to the characters. And then the characters that the other players have created then explore that world and make decisions as to how they're going to deal with things and the dangers and the threats. So they're like the actors in the show. And you use dice to determine if you succeed or fail at most substantial tasks. I mean, obviously not like opening a door, but can you jump onto the back of a running horse or something like that? You might have to roll a die, and different games have different mechanics to determine whether you would succeed or fail. But at its core, I would say that Dungeons and Dragons, like I said, it's a game that's about creating a shared narrative, a shared story between the group and the players. And one of the things I really like about it is that I still have players talk about that thing that happened that one time in the
really?
game that was like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
And it's like that favorite scene you have on a TV or a movie show, and you talk about it, only this time it's something that you did or were a part of. And so it's a much more, it can be a much more immersive experience. And it takes a bit of being able to not take yourself so seriously, obviously, if you're gonna and there's people who play it at different levels of immersion. There's some people who play it very much like it's a board game where their character is just a little token, they move around and they don't really get into their personality. And then there's people who, get really, they write backstories, they write, 50-page histories of their character and everyone they've ever known and loved and all that stuff. They keep in-character journals. In fact, one of my players now, while we played last night, and he was keeping a journal in character as we were playing. That's
really neat.
Yeah, it is really cool. And and that's just something he just decided to do off his own back. I didn't. It's not required or anything. Just something he does because he enjoys doing it. So I mean that's what it is. It's games vary in complexity. Some of them are really complicated with lots of rules and lots of books, and then others are really light and simple. I mean, there are some role-playing games that are literally 1 page long.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily. I mean, I know some people look at them and they think, oh, that's really complicated or whatever. But basic D&D, which is what I started with when I was 9 years old, has like a 64-page book. That's it.
Well, I never played like you did because I was too shy. I was very introverted and didn't have a lot of friends. But I did have the book on elves. I will confess to yeah, I did. I swear I had two actually, and I would just look at the pictures. So,
right.
But I never had anyone teach me how to play, and I was always very intrigued by it. And honestly, there were not many girls. There were no female friend of mine. They were like, "That's kind of weird, Amber. That's kind of weird. Like you and your Star Trek and all that shit. You're kind of weird." So I didn't really know anybody to play with when we came to that kind of stuff. So I sort of just read the books and just did my thing. And if I'd known you, but we didn't meet until college.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're
college. And unfortunately, we didn't get to know each other very well, or else I would have been like, "You like elves? Well, let me tell you about this game."
I know. Okay. So our backstory is we worked together and knew each other in college. We worked at a library, and I was going through that really bad relationship. And then I just left one day and you left. But then we actually got to know each other on MySpace when MySpace was a thing, because we found each other on MySpace. Yeah. And we talked for a long time. And
you're dating. Huh? I think you're dating us by talking about MySpace.
Oh shit, I am. Well, yeah. Very. Yeah, I know. I'm dating us a lot here, but it's interesting because we've kind of gotten to know each other more, I guess, because of social media. You never saw those aspects of my personality because of everything that we were both involved in back then. We were involved in a lot of stuff back then, so we never really got to know each other.
No.
It's funny how social media can bring people together. That you remember and you wonder why you remember them, and you're like, God, we have all this stuff in common that we never even knew we had. No one ever even we never even made that connection. But
no, exactly.
How do you think? So D&D role playing, obviously, can we call it the father, the grandfather of what would be modern gaming, online gaming?
Absolutely. I mean, all role playing games can trace their lineage back to Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, there were some things that happened slightly before Dungeons and Dragons, which sort of set the stage, but nothing like what D&D finally did. And it just sort of opened the doors to these ideas. And the thing that was really interesting about, if you go all the way back to the original, what's called the Little Brown Books, because when it was originally released, it came in a small cardboard box that was about yay big.
I remember that.
and there were little tiny pamphlet books.
Yeah.
And if you read them today, like I read them, I got a PDF scan of them and I was reading them, and oh my God, they're almost indecipherable because because everyone who played at the time, they were war gamers and they were coming out of a war gamer culture. So there was a lot of stuff. They wrote it for other war gamers who sort of kind of knew some of the stuff they inferred or that they implied rather. But for someone who had no experience with that, like trying to pick it up and play with it, it must have been maddening. So the way it spread is really interesting. It was very viral. It was spread from group to new player. They'd get someone who was interested, they would teach them how to play, and then that person might eventually buy the rules and go run their own game later on. And so it spread from from person to person rather than like in a big market campaign or whatever. And because the rules were so vague and nebulous, and there was a lot of stuff that 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 just kind of wasn't described how to handle, players came up with their own stuff. Other people started seeing this as like, oh, there were flaws, so they created their own games. And and so there was this kind of huge, wild and woolly time period back in the late 70s. And it was funny because there was literally an East Coast, West Coast divide, apparently, in gaming style. In the East Coast, which is where Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson came from, the style was very similar to the way they played, which is to say it was much more kind of grounded and gritty. It was much more like Conan sneaking around in a dark dungeon and that kind of thing. Then out in the West Coast, you had people who, swear to God, were bringing the Enterprise into their D&D game. They had, laser cannons. They had characters that could kill Thor. It was like total gonzo, like power trip fantasy stuff. And and obviously these two groups didn't really like the way each other played. But then, yeah, from this sort of like, because there were no real limits on, or in the very early days, there were no real limits on people just sort of taking it and printing their own stuff. You got all kinds of new games, which were quite clearly D&D with the numbers filed off. But it still, it opened this door. And then, of course, even now, you look at like a lot of video games that you pick up, if they have any kind of role-playing elements, they owe it to D&D. Like some of them literally have the same terminology, like hit points and, and the same sort of stats and stuff that D&D used. I mean, they might be mathematically different, but it's still like, the bones are there, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely say that pretty much most, and because TSR got so big into novels in the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of fantasy authors and novels are really influenced by Dungeons and Dragons, even if it's not clear, not direct, but it's still like they grew up playing it, and you can kind of tell with some of their characters, like, oh, that guy's a ranger, and this guy's a so and so, and so. And I mean, of course, they have earlier influences. I mean, you mentioned Tolkien and stuff like that, which, I mean, obviously that influenced D&D. And in fact, in the original Little Brown books, they had hobbits and Balrogs and Ents, and then they got sued by the estate of Tolkien, so they took those out and they changed them to halflings. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yes, they got sued by the Tolkien estate, and or maybe they were just threatened. I mean, I don't know that it actually went to court, but they just changed everything, and so it went. They're now called halflings. They're called Baelors instead of Balrogs, and we have Treants instead of Ents. But if you can see an original scan of the original, like way back, it had all that stuff in it. They produced, when they started doing advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which came several years later, that was the kind that was kind of our age group, high school, or was it? Okay. Yeah, that was the stuff I started with basic, and then over the course of my teen years, so slowly picked up the advanced stuff. But that was certainly what was circulating. Okay. Time period.
Now, if people wanted to play this on Skype or Hangouts, your games are very accessible. They could actually do this on Skype or Hangout. So in a way,
I often run games.
Huh?
Sorry, no, please go on.
Oh, so in a way, your games could kind of be like computer games. They're doing the whole, face-to-face thing. Yeah,
I have played many times on Skype and on Google Hangouts, or for example, when I was back in the States visiting my family this last time, one of my friends visited from DC for a short while, and then he had to go back, and we continued playing, and so he would Skype into the game.
That's cool.
And there was even one session where Shelley Skyped in from Scotland because she also plays in that game. So no, and there's a lot of people who do hangout games. It is a big thing for people.
So I guess I should give people a little bit more background. Matthew is from one of my states. He's from Tennessee. We both went to school in Chattanooga. So you're a native Tennessean, and he married a lovely lass from Scotland, and you live in Scotland now, and you have a daughter.
Correct. Yes.
So he's actually talking to us from Scotland, UK, which is really cool. And what do you want to so when exactly do you think, when did D&D technically, what date did it actually start? Was it actually out there? Like, do you know an exact in the ether?
Well, it was published in 1974.
1974, okay.
Yeah, so it existed in a slightly different form in '73, but not as but it was like in different groups' hands who were like testing it
Mhm.
and stuff. But as
Mhm.
far as its publication date, it was 1974. So it's been around for 41 years,
Wow. Okay.
which is pretty extreme. It's currently on its fifth edition by Wizards of the Coast. Had just last year released the new fifth edition. I've read it, but I've not had a chance to play it. It looks really good. It sort of balances a lot of modern game design, um, sort of things that have been learned through modern game design, but with a lot of the feel of the earlier editions. So I feel like it's a good kind of middle ground between
Mhm.
newer styles and older styles. Um, but yeah, but if people wanted, of course, kind of depends on what you want. I mean, obviously that's the new and shiny, and you can get that if you want like the newest stuff. But there's a lot of the clones, a lot of the old school stuff that I mentioned, like Labyrinth Lord, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and Basic Fantasy. These are all clones of the earlier editions, and they're all free. You can get a free version of the rules. You can pay more for like an
Mhm.
art filled edition. But so like I mean, if you want to play, if you want to learn to play, you can find it on the web for free,
Mhm.
very easily. And and I don't mean in a pirating way. I mean in a legit,
Yeah.
like they
Totally.
offer the rules for free. Even some of the newer editions have what's called an SRD, or a system
Mhm.
reference document, which, while incredibly dry reading, do have the complete rules online. Like the
Mhm.
third edition of the game, you can get a system reference document that has pretty much everything for it, and it's just on the web for free. Which, it was because of that is what allowed the old school movement to start, because that was when the third edition came out, it took the game in a very different direction mechanically, which some people loved and some people didn't. But because they did an open game license with the idea that they wanted to make sure that no matter what happened to the company, no matter what happened to the owners of the company or whatever, D&D would exist in the wild forever.
Wow.
Because the license was unrevocable. And so basically, it's because of that license, people like me have been able to go back and make stuff for the older editions by kind of, you know, folding and twisting and manipulating
Mhm.
the rules so that they look like the older editions rather than the newer stuff. So yeah, so it was a really nice thing that they did. I'm not a huge fan of the third edition. I mean, I used to be, but I stopped liking it for various reasons.
So I really want to know, since you've been playing this for many years, what type of character do you like to play? What's your favorite type of character to be? I mean, obviously, I think everyone knows I'd choose an elf.
Yeah, yeah.
But your go-to like character of choice, typical
Um,
stereotypical.
if I'm playing a stereotypical character, it is an elf or elf analog, because I too am a huge
High
elf
five.
nerd. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm an elf lover all the way. And so it's if there's like a mystical pointed eared alien race, if it's a sci-fi game, then that's the one I'm gonna play. Whatever.
Yeah.
Um, that or a wolf person. But anyway, but
A wolf
like if it's a
person.
fantasy game, I want an elf, more or less,
Mm-hmm.
and or a fae, something like that. And as far as like what the character type, I want someone who's like both skilled in fighting and magic. I like someone who can do
Mm-hmm.
both. But if I can't have both, then I typically go more towards magic. Because I find that in most games, characters who have magic have more options with
Really?
stuff that they
Okay.
can do in the game, whereas martial characters often, unfortunately, are not as mechanically supported. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't get as much they don't get as many buttons, if you will, that you can manipulate the world with, which I think is a sad thing. I mean, I think that's a real missed opportunity. I mean, some games do a really good job, like with martial arts or whatever, but I think in most games, and D&D is a big culprit of this. That if you play a fighter, your fighter really doesn't have, depending on the edition you're in, doesn't have a lot of options when it comes to go time, whereas the wizard has this huge list of things that they can do at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
And as they get stronger, as they get stronger, the fighter gets bigger numbers, but the wizard gets a bigger and bigger list of stuff they can do. And so I like being able to have those options and be creative with them. So yeah, but I also like to swing a sword. So I like an elven fighter mage. That's my number one. Got to play it all the time. That's what I play.
On that note, I have to ask: have you seen that comedy, Knights of Badassdom? Is it called Knights of Badassdom?
Not yet. Is it good? Is it good?
Hilarious. Yes,
okay.
You have to watch it. It's one of the funniest movies. That guy who played in what's that vampire?
True Blood.
True Blood. The guy who plays a funny brother, and that's what it's called, right? The Knights of Badassdom. Okay.
Yeah, it's Knights of Badassdom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen because I went to high school with guys like that. And I swear they acted like that. And I was such a social reject with the girls that I used to have to eat lunch with them. They were the only ones who would talk to me. And they acted like that. It was so awesome. And so that, every character in that movie reminded me of a guy I went to school with. So I really enjoyed that movie. And also another one's coming out. It's not released yet. I think March 1st it goes to, you can rent it online or something, but it's called Dudes and Dragons.
Dudes and Dragons?
Yeah, I think it's Dudes and Dragons. You have to look at the trailer.
Okay. I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, I mean it looks really funny, but I love spoofs like that. I think it's really because they always find the right character that represents someone that in real life.
Right.
Yeah. So
there's a really good spoof like that called Gamers.
Oh really?
Yeah, which is the original one. It's really short. I think it's only like an hour or something, but it's funny because it's got the people playing the game around the table, and then occasionally it goes to you seeing what their characters are doing. So of course it's the player dressed up as their character, and of course it plays on the kind of tropes and the bad gamer stereotypes, and where they're just they're just terrible players, and it's what do you mean I can't backstab him with a ballista? It doesn't say I can in the rules, and the GM's like, okay, fine, and and you see the guy dragging one into the room, and it's funny. It's that kind of spoof. So you might, I mean, I know you won't you won't necessarily, all the humor might not appeal to you, but I think it's funny enough anyway on its own. You should check it out. It also shows you what it's like to be in a bad game.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Have you been in a few of those?
Pardon?
Have you been in a few bad games?
Oh yes, I've been in many bad games. I've been in worse LARPs, but I've been in many bad games. It's really about the players. I mean, a lot of times it has nothing to do with the referee or the game master. It just depends on how the other players play. I mean, if they're if you've got somebody who wants to be a grandstanding attention hog, or has to make everything be about them or whatever, it's hard. The social contract of the game is that your characters have to work together to survive. And most tables, most gaming groups, like actually attacking another player is kind of off limits, because it creates, it usually creates bad feelings and whatnot. For good reason. Like I tend to not allow it at my games, unless there's a really good reason. Luckily, I don't play with jerks anymore. I've gotten over that. I used to. I mean, I used to have this, because like I'm pretty shy, and it's when you meet someone who's into the stuff you're into, you kind of try to overlook their flaws.
Yeah.
And there was this sort of belief that bad gaming is better than no gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, I realized that that's bullshit.
Yeah, that's like saying bad sex is better than no sex. That's just not true.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, sometimes I've played in games where maybe I wasn't that interested, but because I wanted to hang out with the people, I did it as a social activity. But that's a bit different from hanging out with people that you actively don't like. Which I have done that as well too, and that's just not fun. So I don't do that anymore. It's been a long time.
Speaking of, okay, I remember one thing. One reason I was kind of hesitant to always like join a game or anything, because only guys did it. But not only that, I remember overhearing at the lunch table, two guys fighting about someone killed his character. Another one killed another one's character.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear, as long as I knew them, they never got over it. Like they never got over it. One always hated the other one because he killed his character. It was almost like he killed a part of himself. So I was like, damn, I don't know if I want to get into that. So,
I mean, yes, some people do, a lot of people do take that sort of thing very personally, because if the character is something that you've invested a lot of time and emotion and thought and creativity into, I mean, it is a part of yourself. It's just, you hear about writers all the time talking about, oh, and then when I killed this character, I was in tears when I wrote their death scene. Well, it's no different with a game character. I mean, if it's one where you really care about it and you've spent a lot of time. I mean, some people, they create a character and they don't really get involved with it. It's just like some numbers on a sheet, and if it dies, they just roll up a new one and no big deal. And some people, their character dies, but they're like, oh, that was awesome, that was a great story, I'm happy with how it ended, blah blah blah. But I mean, I think it's natural that with anything, that if you care about it and you put your energy into it and thought into it, that if someone takes it away from you, you're going to be upset. And it's one thing when the game master does it, because that's kind of expected. That happens. You get eaten by a monster or whatever. It's another thing when your so-called friend stabs you in the back because he wanted to steal your magic sword. Then it's, that's like a whole, like, it's not only do you lose that thing you care about, but it's a betrayal as well.
Well, I mean, you wonder if they're premeditating that in a game, can you carry that into life? I have to apologize for everyone behind me watching this. Behind me is a window, and I have the shutters shut, but there's a tall skylight, and I don't have anything I can put over that. So I apologize if it's too bright. I just want to say that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're just sort of fading away as
I know.
the video goes on.
It's kind of one of those skylight windows, and there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, the shutters are completely closed. It's just the one up there. So.
But yeah, I mean, I've lost some characters. One of my character deaths is actually one of those stories that I talk about years later, because to me it was really cool, and it was a fitting into the character. So it all just sort of depends on how it happens. But I mean, and I assume you're talking about people you knew in high school, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you've got young people and egos and stuff. And I mean, I think as people get older, they get more comfortable with that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I've known people who've gotten really really personally invested, and if something bad happens to their character, it's the end of the world. But luckily, that's few and far between.
I kind of see that happening, or I hear snippets. Of course, I'm not a gamer, but I think it's that way sort of for online gaming, for these computer games that younger people my age play them too. I'm in my 30s, but still, I think that, it's the same for them when they lose a character, but they literally have to build up a character online. It's just not on a piece of paper.
Yes.
So they have to go back in and make another virtual character created.
Well, they would have to do that in the tabletop game too. I mean, there's no that's exactly the same thing. I mean, depending on the kind of game you're in, sometimes if you lose a character that's advanced to a certain level of power, you have to start over again at the ground floor and work your way up. Most games these days, most games I hear about don't really do that. They'll give you something back with your new character, so you're not. I guess it just depends on how advanced the group is that you're in.
Yeah, I can see that. Like how, yeah. I guess
I
it
mean, because
depends on, yeah.
if everyone's playing Gandalf, it kind of sucks to come in and be the only Hobbit in the group, you know. So
That's true. I can see that. Like if, like, you know, if everyone wanted to be, I don't know, a warrior, there wouldn't be anyone to a healer or whatnot. So,
well, and also, I mean, just to defend the hobby for a second, I just want to say, like this um, kind of thing where people react to something that they care about, you know, being hurt or being lost. I mean, this plays out in all kinds of things in the world. It's not just tabletop games. I mean, I know some people are like, oh, you know, gamers, they're so, you know, they get so bent out of shape if they lose a character or whatever. But you know, if you look at like crime statistics, when the home sports team loses, you know, they go up, they skyrocket, and stuff like that. So I mean, it's not, people react badly about all kinds of things that they're personally invested in if it doesn't go their way. So I mean, I know you weren't, you know, accusing the game of being that way, but I just, for your listeners, I just wanted to throw that out as a thing, like to, you know, yes, some players might get bent out of shape about losing a character, but you know, that's better than say them going out and rioting because their sports team lost.
yeah. I agree. I definitely agree. You know, all the gamers I know are pretty decent people. I don't know a lot of bad gamers. So
I wish I could say the same.
oh.
But I've known a lot, so it just, you know, it's like any subsection of anything that you that you encounter. You're gonna have your good apples and your bad apples.
Yeah.
So can I talk about my latest book?
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay, so this is my current book in nice softback. You can get it in PDF or softback or hardback. And it's called Between Star and Void, which I think that's probably backwards, but you know, there you go. Between Star and Void. It is a supplement for White Star, which, like I said, was the science fiction game, science fiction D&D style game. However, the rules in this are designed to work with any of the OSR style games. So, you know, basically any kind of D&D, pardon me, from second edition to earlier, Labyrinth Lord, any of that stuff, this mechanically, this will work with it. This book, White Star, included rules for characters called Star Knights, which were not Jedi, and Void Knights, which were not Sith, and but there wasn't. I mean, there was just the rules to create the characters and their powers, and I really liked that. But a couple of things. One of the things that I didn't like about it was that because this was based on D&D, their powers were also based on the way D&D has powers, which is often that you get X number of powers per day, and you get more of them, and they get stronger as you level up. And that doesn't really fit the source material. You know, you never saw Luke run out of telekinesis or whatever, or mind reading or any of that. So, I mean, and I totally understand why James, the writer of White Star, I totally understand why he did it, and it, you know, and it works. It works well, but it wasn't quite to my taste. So I started writing a new system for their powers that would be more like, would feel more to me like a telekinetic psychic warrior type with a glowy sword. And as I wrote that, then I started having these other ideas like, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if they could modify their star swords? Wouldn't it be cool if there were other variations of them, like, you know, alien Star Knights or, you know, whatever. And so it just spiraled until I ended up with a 100-page book, 109 pages or 8 pages, something like that. And so, yeah, so it's like a whole supplement on with new classes, new ways of playing a character which very closely resembles a Jedi, but some people have said also reminds them a bit of the Green Lantern Corps, if you're familiar with the Green Lantern.
A little bit. I never really got into superheroes.
Okay.
So I like Catwoman.
Oh yeah, she's cool. She's cool. Well, I mean, it's funny because I didn't write this with them in mind at all. But I've had several people comment that having read it, they feel like they could run a game that's kind of like the Green Lantern Corps, which is to say, basically like sort of interstellar space police rather than Jedi versus Sith or whatever. So yeah, so it's got all kinds of rules for that sort of stuff. It's got it's got new equipment that they use, new ships, and a big section of the book is the new power system that I wrote up, which basically gives them abilities that they can use at will rather than a limited number of times a day. I watched a lot of Clone Wars cartoon and Rebels cartoon as research material for this book. So anyway, I'm quite proud of it. It's the first thing that I've written where I've done a book, where I've published a book. Because while the Sinister Stone of Saqqara is actually my first like published book, I didn't, I just wrote the text, and then other people did, the company did the rest of it.
Tell us about your first work, because that's what you sent me, correct?
I sent you a bunch of PDFs. I don't think I sent you Sinister Stone.
Okay. You sent me one called The Relics of the Akashics.
Akashics, yeah, that was one of my earlier PDFs. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll go in numerical order. So Sinister Stone of Saqqara was a book that I wrote in 2012. Yeah, 2012. And that is a module for beginning characters for Adventure Conqueror King or for any other OSR game. I mean, it's the same kind of statistics and stuff. So whether you're playing basic expert D&D or you're playing Labyrinth Lord or whatever, it's, you can use this. It's a module that is meant to introduce new players to kind of the tropes and the ideas of dungeon exploration. The first level of the dungeon, which is quite, I mean, the dungeon is really big. There's both levels are quite large, but the first level has about 4 different factions in it that, while they're technically allied, they don't like each other, but also because they're used to humans and stuff wandering around in there, they're not necessarily immediately going to attack people. So if you're smart, you can play them off against each other, or other kinds of role-playing opportunities, or you can just go in and kill everybody, your choice. So the first level is kind of normal D&D. The second level, when you get down there, things start getting really bizarre and chaotic and horror, more like a horror movie, where there are living veins crawling through the stonework and abominations coming out of birthing pools.
Very Lovecraftian.
Yes, it is extremely Lovecraftian. And in fact, the name of the module, which is Sinister Stone of Saqqara, is about the titular stone, and that is the MacGuffin that the characters are after. Well, they don't know it at first, but eventually they begin to realize, like, oh, there's this thing and we've got to stop it. And it's what's causing all of this stuff. It's an ancient evil artifact, and it's being used by the Lady Below, who is this chaotic kind of warrior sorceress who's very scary for the level of character who will be meeting her. So it's just it's a really there's a lot of ways to approach it. I mean, you could even technically ally with her if you wanted to. I mean, you could become a villain if you thought to do that. The company decided, after I turned in the manuscript, they asked me to add about half again as many words, because they liked it so much and they wanted me to flesh some stuff out. So that was really cool. Then they added, they decided, initially it was just going to be the dungeon, but then they decided it would be good for it to be like a complete starter module. So they included like a settlement, a keep, which can be like the character's home base, and they included like all the descriptions of the people living there and all that stuff. And there's also kind of there's some politics going on in the keep. So if you want to get involved in that kind of thing, you can, but you don't have to. You can ignore all that and just go straight to the dungeon and beat up monsters. It's just how the players what they decide to get involved with.
That's
which I think was Oh, no, go ahead.
The Akashics. I have to ask about the name. Is that why that Akashic, the word is in there, the whole Atlantis thing? Because remember when I used to be big into that?
Yeah, I do. Well, when I wrote the Akashics, and I actually got flack for using that word.
I was wondering, did he pull that from our mythology? Because we kind
No,
of
no, no, no. The Akashics, that was all me. That was the Sinister Stone. That was its own thing, and then that was done. The stuff I sent you, Psionics II, and Akashics, those are kind of related PDFs that are also for White Star.
Okay.
And the Akashic, so that's all for the science fiction thing. And the Akashics were, I really like that word, you know. And I kind of gave them sort of a Hindu vibe because the race were psychic. So I was thinking, you know, like yogis and stuff,
I saw
and heightened
that.
consciousness. Yeah. So that was sort of my idea. You know, I didn't mean it. You know, in no way did I mean it. Is it meant disrespectfully or anything? But because it's all
I was
like,
just, I was wondering if you were basing it on old mythology and kind of blending it when see that I thought that was really cool, and I immediately picked up on that word. And do you want to explain a little bit of that, what Akashics is, so people kind of know?
Well, I've read so many definitions.
Edgar
it's hard
Casey.
Yeah. Well, in the mythology, there. What's the version you've heard?
I've just heard like the Edgar Casey version, like they were the records of Atlantis, the library.
Okay. Yeah. The Akashic record. Yeah, that's it. That's where I heard the term, is the Akashic record, which is supposed to be this record of all life and all whatever. But it's also very closely, at least to me, it's thematically related to like Hindu mythology. Some of the weapons and things that are in there, I actually took their names from various weapons from Hindu mythology, just because I thought it was cool. Some of their ships are named after like you know, Hindu like chariots of the gods and
That's
stuff.
really cool. Yeah, that whole.
So I mean, granted, the race is completely evil and whatnot, but in no way am I implying anything by that. It's just I like the terminology. I liked how it sounded. And I like the idea, because I even sort of implied that they seeded other worlds and stuff. So
So what are they supposed to look like?
Well, I never described them because I kind of left that open to the game master. But I mean, in my head, they look like evil elves.
Okay.
That's how I view them.
Those bad guys on the Thor movies, the white ones.
Yes. Like the dark elves. Yeah. I envision them that way, but because I wrote that book as just as a sort of generic supplement for anyone to plug into their game, I didn't put a lot of details because I wanted it to be something where, you know, if they wanted them to be giant space slugs, they could be giant space slugs.
See, I really like the idea of doing just PDFs like that, just like where you can supplement a game with another, because it kind of gives you a sense of where something, you get tired of doing something the same way, you can kind of inject new life into it. So I can see people who are gamers, how they like to sort of expand their universe like that. It's kind of like an author writing another trilogy to a series, a larger series of chronicles, or even going back and writing and I guess in this case a prequel. Yeah,
kind of. I mean, I kind of have been, because it was linked to the Psionics supplement. And the Psionics were written because that was one thing White Star didn't actually have, was a system for psychic abilities, and so I just came up with this idea, which, you know, was my own thing, and it was different from any of the I mean, there's been a lot in D&D in all of its years has had a lot of different sonic systems, and pardon me, and some of them have been good, and some of them have been pretty bad. And this what I came up with was totally different. Like it's not a duplicate or anything of anything that's ever been. And but players like new options, and so, like, you know, oh, I've played a mercenary and I've played a pilot, and you know, I'm bored of the characters in the book. Oh, cool, what's this guy? I can play a Sonic warrior. That sounds awesome. Let me play that guy. So, you know, so that's kind of the idea there, is like these little supplements. You know, if you just want this one class, and here's how their powers work, boom, there you go. and then I wrote the Akashics because I wanted to have psychic equipment, like sort of like magic items, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I decided to go with the idea of a dead empire rather than it being something that people build today, but I guess that just makes it feel more mysterious and whatnot.
It does, and I like it. I mean, that was when I was kind of drawn to. I was like, huh, and glad that you explained it to me.
Well, it also has a lot more narrative in it than the other books do, to be fair. They're mostly like, here's some rules, and that one's more like, here's this history of this galactic empire and this huge war, then everyone's dead now, and so that one does have much more story to it.
Mm-hmm.
I've considered, and I don't know if I'll do this or not, but I have toyed with the idea of taking all of my Psionics stuff and releasing like a second edition, like complete book, which has everything from all those PDFs and more new stuff, like psychic races,
cool.
and it might even have like a section about the return of the Vren or the Akashics.
And I like that name, Vren. Where'd you get that from?
Just sounded neat.
See, that's cool. That's a cool dude. That's a name I would name a cat. Vren. That's a really be a cool name for a cat.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really, unfortunately, of the three products of Psionics II and Akashics, that one sold the least well. But I actually like, it's my favorite because I just had so much fun, making up doomsday weapons and weird psychic armor and stuff like that. Like, that was a lot of fun. But I mean, I can see, like, a lot of people don't want to run they want to run a campaign of something like Firefly or whatever. They don't have a lot of room for psychics in it. Fair enough. Or if they're running Star Wars type game, then they already have Star Knights and they don't need another power system. So I get it, but yeah, that one's my favorite.
That's neat. Yeah.
I have a lot. I mean, some of it was very Babylon 5 influenced in some ways. Like I when I was visualizing it and writing about the final battle and
that's cool.
The thing they used to destroy their star, and anyway. So I had a lot of fun.
It's interesting that you brought up Babylon 5 because you're one of the only people that I know that liked Babylon 5. And I liked Babylon 5. I was a fan. I watched it back in the day. And then a couple years ago, Brian and I rewatched the entire series. We binge watched that entire old series one holiday break. So that's just neat because I don't know if anyone out there even remembers Babylon 5.
Anybody who doesn't like Babylon 5 is objectively wrong. So you just have to take that. I mean, it is, to me, not that this is what we were here to talk about, but to me, like, Babylon 5 is still like the high watermark of what a show with a continued continuity should be. It's why, like, when like Lost and shows like that, where they have this deep mystery or whatever, but then by the time, or Babylon, not Babylon, Battlestar Galactica, where you can tell by the second or third season that the writers really had no idea where they were going with the damn thing. They just, here's a mystery, and if the show gets picked up again, we'll figure out what the mystery is. I hate that. Like, Babylon 5, the guy knew how it was going to end before he started writing it, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think you should ever do, like, it's really difficult when you do a series by the seat of your pants because you're always going to lose people. And when you bring in different writers and they do different weird things to the characters and very, very, very bizarre. But a little bit of did you ever watch Deep Space Nine? Were you into Deep Space Nine?
No, I always saw it as a knockoff of Babylon 5. I watched
some episodes, but it wasn't.
Well, I mean, when it first started, it really felt because it was another space station and there were warring groups, blah, blah, blah. And it just, to me, so I never really got into it. I mean, I watched some of the stuff during the Dominion War, and that was kind of cool. But I never followed it like I did Babylon 5.
Back in the day, it was my favorite, I think. And I think I liked Deep Space Nine because it showed that the Federation was not lily white. There was a lot of internal strife and problems. And also showed that, like, the Romulan Empire, they were not really that dark. Now, the Cardassians, they were the ones that you had to worry about because they were like they tried to genetically cleanse out the Bajoran people. I'm totally nerding out, geeking out right now. Sorry.
We're talking about D&D. I don't think we can get any nerdier, so it's all right.
Okay, okay. But how much, just wondering, I know, but you said Babylon 5 influenced you in everything, but, or at least in what we're talking about here, the relics of the Akashics, how much did Star Trek, and I know Star Wars had a little bit of an influence, but how much did Star Trek influence you?
Honestly, I wouldn't say much. I feel like Trek has a very distinct vibe, and I feel like I feel like the stuff that I've written, it's all been very heavily either Star Wars or Babylon 5. I think those are my biggest sci-fi influences. Now it's funny because a friend of mine, again, a social media friend, someone I became friends with after doing this, he actually released a book for White Star called 5-Year Mission, where you can play kind of like a Federation style, Star Trek style game using the White Star rules. And he has new classes and stuff like the Commander and stuff like that, where so you can play those kind of characters and those kind of things. And it's also kind of got a Farscape vibe. I don't know if you ever watched.
I was a big Farscape fan.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It has living spaceships like as a character type you can play. Yeah, it's really cool. It's called 5-Year Mission, and it's also available on RPGNOW.com.
How did we not know all this about each other back in the day? And we only discovered.
I don't know.
I mean,
you sat in Tisa's office and were really quiet.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, you know everything that's going on back then. And I just kind of, and I was also doing my homework on that computer too, by the way, on my papers. I was writing on my papers on that computer because I didn't have a computer of my own,
Wow.
Yeah. So she let me sit in there and type out every paper that I had to on that. So that's what I was actually doing.
Tisa's awesome.
Yeah, she is. She's really cool, and she kind of knew that what was going on back then and everything. But yeah, and I remember you being into vampires at that time.
Yep.
And
I'm a huge vampire fan.
And so I like the original Dracula, but I can't get into the whole vampire culture. It just, and I think a little bit of it is kind of, I kind of snob it a little bit because you know how I've always been pale and I used to dye my hair black. People always thought I was goth. I was never a goth. Ever was I a goth. But I always got mistaken for being goth, and it pissed me off. So can you please explain a little bit of that? And not that we're talking about goth here, but why is it when someone has really pale skin, which naturally I do, I'm allergic to the sun, which is ironic because
I know, because
it's bleeding me out here. I'm just a ball of white light now with my.
I know
hair.
you've become an energy being at this point.
I know. Oh, well.
Elevated.
See, I really am an elf. But so why is it that the dark featured, pale skin? I wouldn't say dark featured, but dark haired people always get blamed for being goth. And I mean, and they say it in a bad way. They they make fun of you, and it's not like I'm going to go sit in a tanning bed and wrinkle.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know, because I mean, and I don't know why goths get such a hate. I mean, I used to be pretty big into goth culture and stuff. I mean, I was not so much. I mean, I didn't go out with like white face makeup and stuff, but I like the clothes, I like the style. It's just something that appealed to me, and I used to dye my hair black, and
I think we're both guilty of that.
Yeah.
To do that. We probably use the same hair dye.
Yeah, probably. And I don't know. I mean, I got a lot of abuse from people sometimes, but then I mean, I remember, and this was just a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I was going just to the grocery store down the road from where we live, and I walked past some feral youths, some like 10, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, I don't know, and one of them was like, goth, like it was an insult, and I was just wearing I was just wearing like a black trench coat because of the weather. It wasn't like I was like all in frilly vampire lace or whatever. I think I probably had a black t-shirt on, but that was it. Like I had black hair and black clothes. So immediately, even though I wasn't, if I'd been wearing a leather biker's jacket, I would have been as goth as I was that day. and and they were like chewing like candy or something, and one of them threw one of them at me and missed, and I was just like, what the fuck, right? But then again, when I was in New Orleans and I was dressed up as a vampire for Halloween, I had a couple of women, being like, "Bite me, Louie, bite me." So it has its pluses and minuses. So
yeah.
But yeah, I've often been accused of being a vampire. I've had some friends tell me that they dreamt of me as a vampire in their dreams.
Oh, that's kind of creepy and weird. Did that kind of freak you out? That maybe, that they're dreaming. Were they male or female? I gotta ask. I'm sorry.
Both female. I think if a guy dreamt of me as a vampire,
ooh, high five.
Yeah. I don't think he would tell me if it was a guy.
No, probably not.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like you, I'm kind of allergic to sunlight, so yeah, there is that. I don't know, but yeah, I used to love, there is an exoticism and a romanticism about vampires. There's the appeal of the tormented character. There's also the appeal of immortality. And of course, pardon me, vampirism is really just a cipher for sex. So it's all very sexual. So I totally get the appeal, and I also, but I'm not a snob about it. Like, I also like my vampires in trench coats with katanas and stuff. So action superhero vampires, I like those too. So
yeah, well, I like the Southern Gothic element of some of the vampire culture.
Oh, yeah.
That's one aspect. It's like, okay, Southern Gothic, that's cool,
Yeah.
So.
Did you watch True Blood?
Brian and I watched like the first 2 seasons because I thought there was going to be fairy people in it. Like, my mom read the books, and I never read the books, but she said there's going to be fairy people in it. And I was kind of disappointed because they really weren't. I didn't feel like it didn't focus on that anyway.
Right. Well, they show up in later seasons. But I loved in the first season that episode where Bill goes and speaks to the Daughters of the Confederacy, and he actually gives them the history from his own perspective. Like, I don't know, that episode I thought was just brilliant. Like, that was just really cool to me. And that was one of the ones in the first season.
Yeah.
Like many shows that have long run times, it kind of went downhill after a while, jumped the shark. But
yeah. Well, I have to ask, because I asked you to check it out, and the sunlight really makes me look crazy right now. But what do you think of Shannara? MTV, which is Terry Brooks' Shannara.
We're caught up. We've been watching it along. We love it. I mean, it's bad, but it's fun.
You think it's bad? Oh, I love it. I grew up with the books, and I love Amberly. I think they got her character well. Okay. And the Al-Anon, they did a really good job casting Al-Anon.
Okay. When I say it's bad, what I mean is like, some of the actors aren't the greatest. There's also some inconsistencies where, like, for example, the older, like, frou-frou elves all have a British accent, but none of the younger, hip, cool elves have a British accent.
I can see that. Okay, I can see that.
That's like they should all speak British, or none of them should speak with a British accent. Like, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Those kind of bug me, but I enjoy it, and we're glued to it. Yeah. So no, I've read one Shannara book, and that was one set right after the apocalypse. So
okay, so that's a later one.
Yeah, it's a much later one.
Yeah, in the order that he published them. The Elfstones, really, it started with the Sword of Shannara, then the Elfstones of Shannara, and of course, a lot of people started with the Elfstones of Shannara anyway, and the series starts with the Elfstones of Shannara. So,
yeah, because the Sword of Shannara is really just a Tolkien ripoff, isn't it?
That's what they claim. Honestly, that I didn't start with the Sword of Shannara. I'm about to read it now, but when I was a child, I saw the Elfstones of Shannara, and that's the one that I just started with, and I read the next 5, and then I've read some others sporadically. And I just always liked Terry Brooks. I thought he did a great job, and maybe I'm just biased because I read him as I think I was in middle school when I started reading them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, the show has made me kind of want to go back and check out the Elfstones and stuff.
Yeah, you should read the Elfstones.
But I mean, I've read so much sort of griping about the Sword of Shannara that I don't think I could start with that one, just because I'm already like pre-biased against it.
Oh no, yeah. Well,
but I'm curious now, and I mean, of course, it's funny because. And I know this TV show is not 100% with the series, but like the one book I've read, there were female keepers, and they're like, oh, there's never been female keepers. And I'm like, well, there were.
This is going to explain it. This explains all of it because this is set before he wrote that
later.
One. Yeah.
Right, I know.
See, I know how it goes. So I already, I know how they're going to write that in. But did you notice I think it was last week's episode, the D&D reference with the dice?
Yes. That was
I thought of you. I'm like, I hope he sees this because I just thought of you when they were in that old ruins and she finds all those little elf is holding those. You're the first person I thought of, but anyway.
We love that scene. We were like, ah!
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really cool. Well, let me real quick. Let me tell you about the book I'm writing now, and then I should probably head off. Unfortunately, so I'm currently working on a new book for White Star, and this is going to be a toolkit book for both players and game masters to change and modify and add to their settings and their campaigns however they see fit. And so this is going to be a book with basically chapter after chapter of sort of optional things you can add to your settings, or ways you can tweak the rules. For example, one of the chapters is on races, and it includes building your own alien. So you can just like sort of pick from a list of abilities. I want an aquatic race that is also immune to cold, or I want an avian race that is also very strong, or whatever. And so you've got all these different traits that you can pick, and so you can kind of build your own unique alien race out of that. One of the chapters is on cybernetics. So if you want to do something cyberpunk, you can add that to your game. It includes rules for cybernetics as well as rules for things like how cybernetics might detrimentally impact your mental state as you lose more of your meat to the machine. It also has BioWare, which is like, because some settings have cybernetics, but it's living cybernetics, like implants or parasites or whatever. So it's the same kind of concept, but it's a very different feel to it. So I've also got a section on that. It's got a skill system, which the original game lacks. That's really simplistic, just goes with one 6-sided die. I'm also doing, I'm planning on doing new rules for things like powered armor and some heavy weaponry, maybe some rules on modifying equipment so characters can, take their favorite blaster and make it better or do something unique. So it's just going to have a lot of different options for characters and for the game master to tweak their settings. I'm really excited about that. I'm already at 21,000 words, and I've still got a ways to go. This book was 28,000, so it might even be bigger than this one by the time I'm finished.
And you're going to send me the link to that, so I'll put it in the description. And
to this?
Yes. So everyone can reference it. Yeah.
I'll send you the link to all my stuff, to all my products on RPGNOW. I mean, the new one, of course, obviously it's not done yet. But
so everyone, check out the links because I'm going to put them in after we're off air. So.
So I'll send those to you. That'd be great.
And was that the one where you made a move after me, Lachey, after my middle name, Lachey?
Oh, that's in this one.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's a dueling style. That's you have one of the lightsaber dueling styles is in there. Yeah.
That's cool. Thank you for that. Thank you for naming that.
You're welcome. It's a very elfin style because it relies on dexterity instead of strength and all this stuff. So it made me think of you. So I was like, she'll find this neat.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Really, I really appreciate that. And everyone, please check out his books and his sites, Matthew's books and sites. We should set up a gaming time where we actually play your game online, because I have some friends I can pull in and we can do a big hangout whenever it's convenient. I can
yeah.
get everyone together and we showcase just your game. And you can
Okay.
teach me how to do this.
Okay. That would be cool. That would be really cool. I would really like that.
Cool
Okay. Well,
beans.
thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you being on. And tell Shelly and Morgan I said hi. And
I
everyone,
will.
this is my friend Matthew Skail, and he's author, producer, gamer, writer, all that jazz. Check out his sites. Okay, bye, guys. Sorry about my backlight, my skylight. Mwah. Till next time, guys.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.